And so now that we're in season 3, around the halfway point, we get to briefly dive into arguably the most divisive Breaking Bad episode, Fly, which I didn't realize until...
Divisive?
Yeah. People are really torn on whether this is a good episode or not. This is a hot button thing. I don't know if, well, because you guys were a bit removed from the kind of discussion surrounding these episodes when they dropped. But this episode, and maybe it makes sense that it was directed by Rian Johnson. I didn't know that until I read
the Last Jedi Breaking Bad episode. There you go.
I didn't know that until I read this, and I just was like, really, Rian Johnson? Huh? And so, yeah, what we got here is a bit of a bottle episode. And so for those who don't know, the idea of a bottle episode is basically the filmmakers trying to essentially save some money and allow the show to go other places in terms of things like special effects and sets and cast by having an episode or two that are contained in a small area in a small space, where we're just kind of working with the sets and the characters that we have. And so we have Flies, the episode where they're contained in the lab, almost the entire episode, just trying to kill this fly that's contaminating the lab. So I'm curious where you guys landed on it. Did you think it was a compelling, interesting episode, or just kind of a weird sidetrack, waste of time, artsy thing? Thoughts, Kat?
I actually really liked it. Combination of things. One, I think James will be able to again attest to this. I freaking hate flies.
She's crazy.
Like
crazy.
Like I can borderline, I'm unable to work if there is a fly in my office because I hear it buzzing, and then they always tend to like buzz right past my ear, and so I'm like typing, and then I'm suddenly like like this. Yeah. I hate it. So honestly, as ridiculous as it seems, I kind of felt for Walt. I was like, oh no, I get it, man. There's a fly in there that would make me insane.
This fly has to be dealt with. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was, I think too, though, as far as bottle episodes go, like it didn't really feel, I don't believe that it felt super forced, other than maybe one could argue the fact that Walt went that bonkers about like locking down the thing, and so then they're stuck there. But then everything that happened, it was such a raw and emotional episode of Walt getting so close to telling Jesse about Jane, and then yet not, and yet his sorrow, his deep sorrow at the circumstances of what happened, what he chose to do. And it, honestly, it was so good acting wise and story wise and character wise. And yet at the same time, it was so cruel because the show kind of continues this theme of people talking past each other, like people thinking that they understand what the person's referencing or talking about. That was a huge piece of season 1, right? Where Skylar thinks that it's all about Walt dealing with his cancer, and it's him hiding his drug making, and it's, or then she thinks it's him having an affair, but it's him hiding his drugs. And this way that the characters sort of understand a little bit, but kind of actually miss true ultimate communication, because Jesse never fully understands exactly what Walt is so sorrowful about. Right. And, and so it was a really amazing emotional episode, and yet still that kind of frustrating, like you guys still aren't actually connecting, understanding, or communicating with each other. Honestly, that stunt fall was bonkers. Like, I don't know how they did that without killing somebody.
Well, it looked like it was him. I keep watching it, and I'm like, they did some good stunt work there, because I know that wasn't him.
Yeah, and I've watched a couple of episodes about stunt stuff, like specifically these other YouTubers that do kind of comment on stunt things, and that's actually where I first encountered that stunt fall. Was they were like, oh my gosh, this stunt in Breaking Bad is amazing, and then we hit that episode, and I was like, oh, that's that episode. So, I mean, just some incredible work just acting wise, and then even just props to the stunt people and what they accomplished. But
go Fall Guy. Yeah.
Well, and Walt is not upset about the fly. It's representative of his recognition of his inability to control everything. And so it's a brilliant metaphor, and I really appreciated that, because I had heard of this episode. I remember hearing about it only as if it was a legendary episode in a good way and kind of revered. So I didn't know there was a division between folks. And so I thought, and I going into it, I was like, I know I'm going to hit this episode. In my head, I was like, I wonder if it's going to be self-indulgent and there's just going to be this strange preoccupation with the fly. It's like, no, this obviously had to do with much larger things. It wasn't just about them trying to get the fly. It was all these sort of half confessions. So and it also came to a moment where I think, like, to me, it's the most pivotal moment for Walt in the entirety of the series thus far. And that's where he says, I've lived too long.
Yeah.
It reminded me of actually a line from The Dark Knight where Harvey Dent says, you either die a hero or you live long enough to become the villain.
Ooh.
And he's like, I wish I could have died here, because here I could have died. And I think in a weird way, he's referencing that movie without knowing it. Like, I wish I could have died here and been a hero for my family, had the money, like done the thing. But like, I've now passed this point, and tie in that other point in the season where he says, like, I can't be the bad guy. It's like, it's too late. He's lived long enough to become the villain. So there's this strange. Miles Wallace will appreciate the fact that I tied this to Batman. I got a Batman reference in here.
Yet again, without Miles here. It still happens every time. Oh, man.
But it really does resonate with that. I was like, he's having a Harvey Dent moment. That line in The Dark Knight is so poignant. Like, some of us, like, if I died here, people would remember me as a hero. But shoot, I kept going on. It's like King David. Like, oh, shoot, I've lived. I slayed Goliath. I did all this. It'd be great. Oh, wait, now I've got the Bathsheba Uriah thing. Like, I've gone on past my hero moment, and now I've got this stain. And this episode brought that home so well. I think, no, to me, it right now it stands as a pivotal, like, almost center point for the sort of the tipping point of the show. And so I would not waste, like, kudos to Rian Johnson. I still like The Last Jedi, so we go listen to our last.
Shots fired.
Shots fired.
No, I'll defend Last Jedi a little bit as well. But
so Rian Johnson, I think, delivered here, and obviously it wasn't just him, but like this delivered a pivotal character point for this series. And like I said Mike's speech is the most important thing, but like that admission from Walt is probably like my number 2 favorite thing about this show so far. So there you go.
There's so much that we see the show, we see the characters and all these events through Walt's eyes primarily, which means that there's not a lot of self-awareness on Walt's part. It's more Walt interacting and reacting with things, at least for the time being. But this is one of the rare ones where we actually get something, not just through Walt's eyes, but from Walt's mouth, that we say, oh, wow, didn't know that. For the most part, there's not a ton of mystery behind why Walt does what he does, because he's the one we're meant to identify with. But you're right. This is where we get something from him that is a bit surprising, where it's like, oh, I didn't expect that that's what was under the surface there. I agree. And it's brilliant, even down to the last frame of the episode where, he sees the light above his bed and the fly is still there. I mean, it's just this elusive, ever out of reach thing, right? And it's just something very Ecclesiastes about it, right? But I agree. I think that it was brilliant. It was kind of back in true form in a way. We had a ton of drama and tension between Walt and Jesse for the first half of the season, and the fact that we actually get them on the same team again is not just satisfying for a fan, but it also helps us kind of realize that these two are in orbit together, and there's an attraction between them where they just can't help but be drawn to one another in this surrogate father-son relationship that they have. And it's a return to formula, actually, if you will.
This episode has a moment that kind of turns that on its head as well, because Walt ends up kind of passing out, right? And Jesse sort of takes care of Walt for that moment. Yeah. Tucks him into bed and is kind of like, all right, I'll see you in the morning, that kind of thing. Like there's this little moment where Jesse becomes the father figure for just a moment as he's taking care of Walt.
It's true.
And so, for little things like that, like this show it's very, very clever and very well written with those moments and those turns and different things that happen.
For sure. And I will say that about this episode. Obviously, the suspense builds in terms of the physical events, right? He's up on top of that ladder and you're watching it like, oh, no. Like, that's bad. But there's that almost confession from Walt, which is yet another sign that Walt just can't handle his drugs like his partner can, right? Like in a show about people using and dealing drugs, Walt is clean, except he tries pot once, I think in the show one time. But every time he's under anesthesia, something slips out, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, right? And so we get to see a little bit of that.
We hope you enjoyed this snack-sized taste of Popcorn Theology. Check out the full episode using the link in the description. Subscribe on YouTube for more content. Follow and interact on social media to share with others. And remember, you are not a mindless consumer.